Now we're going to be talking about why strategies fail, and we're going to say that it's because we have human strategists and biased tools. Now that part isn't really a surprise. We know about those things. What may be more of a surprise is that we're going to demonstrate those things today. Now, I'm willing to, looking around the room, I'm willing to provisionally accept that everybody here is human. So that, thank you. So that part, okay, thanks. So that part I think we'll be fine on. It's the tools side and actually the tragic impact of our humanity that may come as a little bit more of a surprise. So that's what we're going to be working with. So I've got a case study for you. This is from a real-life business war game. As you probably heard me say yesterday, I've conducted a couple hundred business war games around the world, Fortune 500 companies, that kind of thing. This is going to be from a real-life business war game. And what I'm going to do is to tell you the situation that they were facing and ask you, what would you do if you were in their position? I'm not going to ask you to say it out loud. This is something that you can just write a couple of notes to yourself, because we're going to come back to this later on in the presentation. But just put yourself in their position and ask yourself, what would you do? So this is a Fortune 500 company. I'm not going to mention their name, but you have heard of them. Situation that they were in was that their sales managers were saying that they were selling a commodity based on price. There was no opportunity to differentiate it. They they needed to fill their factories in order to be profitable, because it's very expensive kinds of factories, very big factories, and so they needed to spread those fixed costs over a large number of units. That was the only way that they could be profitable. Now, their industry was constantly losing money, including them. So, and was also constantly over capacity, because everybody needed to have these big factories for the sake of economies of scale. So this is a fairly classic problem. So what would you do if you were in their position? Just write down a couple of notes to yourself, and we'll come back to that later. So here we've got a bunch of companies. What do these companies have in common other than the fact that they are all on this slide? That's right, all of them went bankrupt. Some of these companies went bankrupt more than once. US Airways went bankrupt twice. Trump Entertainment Resorts went bankrupt twice. Now, some of these companies also have come out of bankruptcy. They're not bankrupt anymore, but all of them at least went into bankruptcy. Now, what they do not have in common is that they are not all in the same industry. So we see, some of these companies would go out of business while their competitors would survive or even prosper. They also do not have in common when they went bankrupt. Some of them went bankrupt during bad economic times. Some of them went bankrupt in good economic times. They didn't even have in common how much time it took for them to go bankrupt. Some of them, like Lehman Brothers and MF Global, went bankrupt in a matter of days. Others, like General Motors, took 30 or 40 years to go bankrupt. Now think about that. That's an amazing thing. It took generations of managers making a series of decisions that inexorably drove GM from being one of the world's great companies to being bankrupt. And they did that over a long period of time. Okay, so that's what they don't have in common. What they do have in common, I presume that none of them wanted to go bankrupt. None of them said, hey guys, let's go bankrupt. That's a great idea. They don't do that. The other thing that they do have in common is that all of them had, or at least could have had, great strategists working for them. So what we're left with is these formerly great companies that did not want to go bankrupt and that had great strategists and went bankrupt anyway. So why did this happen? Let's take that question to the next click. Why do smart strategists choose bad strategies? Now, if you think about it, what we have now in the world today, the level of education we have, the amount of the tools we have, the data that we have, the experience we have, the gurus that we have who are telling us what to do, we should have absolutely the best strategists in the history of industry. And yet, we still choose bad strategies. So why does this happen? Now, there are the usual things that people will talk about, things like, well, we have a short-term orientation, and that's why why we choose bad strategies. Or we have, we're not paying enough attention to the customer, and that's why we have bad strategies. I'd like to suggest that there is at least one other explanation. It's really simple. I'm not sure that it's the entire explanation, but it's at least part of the explanation. The reason why smart strategists choose bad strategies is because they think they're good strategies. Nobody ever chooses the strategy that they think is a bad strategy. Nobody says, I've got a good strategy, I've got a bad strategy, I think I'll take the bad one. We don't do that. So if we choose bad strategies, it's because we thought that it was good, because otherwise we would look for a good strategy. So why does that happen? And that's what we're going to be talking about with our human strategists and bias tools. So I've got a quiz for you. Please do not look online for the answers here. I know that you can do that, but it'll ruin all the fun and all my hard preparation. But this is not like any quiz that you've had before. Because for each of these three questions, what I want you to do is to write down two numbers such that you are 90% sure the right answer is in between them. Okay? So if you don't know the answer, put the numbers far apart. If you think you do know the answer, put the numbers closer together. Do not go for 100% confidence. So the second question, for instance, the population of Peru, you could say it's somewhere between 1 person and 10 billion. If you said that, you would be 100% sure. So don't do that. Bring it in a little bit, be 90% sure. So two numbers for each of these three questions. Can everybody see the questions? Okay, so take a couple of seconds, write down some numbers. Okay, anybody? The first question, Apple's revenue in 2000, according to the 2011 Fortune 500. What are your two numbers? Anyone?
5 and 8 billion.
Between 5 and 8 billion. So you're pretty sure that's a fairly narrow range. Okay? Somebody else? 50 to 70 billion. Okay, so we have two people sitting next to each other, both of whom look intelligent. They're both they're both 90% sure that their right answer is in between their numbers, and they can't both be right. Okay, somebody said something else?
30 to 50.
30 to 50. Okay, so now we have three smart people, and your ranges do not overlap. So at most, well, there's one, if it's exactly 50 billion, then you can both be right. But that's, okay, anybody have any numbers that are significantly different from those we've heard so far? Okay? 200 to 300 billion, I assume. Okay? Anybody with something really different? Okay? 100 to 200. Okay? Cool. So we have a wide range of beliefs here about what's going on with Apple. How about the second question, the population of Peru? Your two numbers, 90% sure the right answer is in between.
20 to 30.
20 to 30 million. Okay. 15 to 20 million. Okay. 5 to 10 million.
10 to 20.
10 to 20. Okay. Also sort of all over the map, so to speak. How many minutes separated the champion from second place in the 1903 Tour de France?
0 to 20 minutes.
0 to 20 minutes. Okay. Somebody else?
0 to 60.
0 to 60 minutes. Okay. So less confident in the answer there. Less sure. Okay. Somebody else? Anybody have any other interesting numbers? 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, so you think it's much narrower and you're much more sure. Okay, would you like to know the right answers?
Yes.
Of course. I was going to show you anyway. Those are the right answers. 65 billion, just a little over 29 million people, and 169 minutes. So count your answers as correct if these numbers are in between the two numbers that you came up with. Now, we should have 90% of the people in the room being correct on each of these questions. Because you're 90% confident that you had the right answer. Show of hands. How many people got the first one right? Take a look around. That's nowhere near 90%. Second question, Peru. How many got that one right? Look around. We're not even close. Third question, Tour de France. How many got that one right? Almost nobody. Cool. Okay. So, by the way, I've run this quiz many times. I've used different questions. I've done it in different countries. I've done it with people who are senior, people who are junior, people who, it doesn't matter. It always turns out exactly the same way. In fact, I'm 100% confident that it's going to turn out this way whenever I run it. What this demonstrates is overconfidence. You knew you didn't know, and I told you, if you don't know, put the numbers far apart. But you still put the numbers too close together. So you thought you knew more than you did. You thought that the boundaries of what could happen in the world were narrower than they actually were. So this is overconfidence. Now, it's just a part of being human. We all do it. And it's no big deal when it comes to something like this. I mean, who cares with these questions? There's not a whole lot of us in this room whose job depends on knowing the answers to these questions. But think about what it's like when it's your business. If we're asking questions about your business, there, you're going to be more overconfident. I know this company, I know this industry, I've been in it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I'm the boss, I'm supposed to know the answer. I'm the boss, I better know the answer. I'm the boss, therefore I do know the answer. There's all these reasons why it would be worse in business than it is even here with what we just demonstrated. And so we have this problem of overconfidence. Okay? You didn't do so well on that. Let's give you a shot on this thing here. This is a spreadsheet. You have seen many spreadsheets like this in the past. You will, I'm sorry to say, see many more of them in the future. Think about this from a strategy point of view. What is wrong with this spreadsheet? The arithmetic is all correct. It's not like I snuck in a 2 someplace where it should have been a 3. What is wrong? Always growing? Okay, but that's what we've been hearing about in the conference, so I want my business to grow. Too accurate. I can put some random noise in there. Will that make it better? What's wrong with it? You're getting suspicious of me and my trick questions, aren't you? No taxes? Okay. Well, you could say, what people have said before, the price growth of 2.5% is too high, or the sales growth, that's too high. But it's a spreadsheet. We can put in different numbers there and see what comes out. There are some constant growth. Okay, what's wrong with that?
Why do you think that 2013 going into 14 is going to be the same as 11 going into 12?
Okay, I could put in a different growth rate. For each year? We could do that for each year, if you have data. But nobody ever has data about the future. There's no such thing as data about the future.
Precision.
Okay.
Precision instills confidence.
Precision, okay. So precision instills confidence. I could show more decimal points here, and then this would look better. Okay?
Revenue can only grow that way if you increase expense.
Okay, there's an assumption here that expenses grow along with revenue. That's correct. I have assumed that these expenses are a constant percentage of sales. But we're not getting at the really key things that are wrong here. And you're enthusiastic about telling me what that is. Assumes history will repeat itself. Well, I'm using history as sort of a baseline to calibrate this from. We could change it from that. But we're not getting at the really important things that are going on here. Where's the competition? Competition doesn't show up here at all. There is no line in that spreadsheet that says effect of a competitor's new product introduction. There is no line in that spreadsheet that says effect of a new competitor entering our market. In effect, what this spreadsheet is doing is assuming that our competitors are going to do whatever it is that we need for them to do for us to get these expenses and these revenues, which is pretty much the same thing as saying that this spreadsheet assumes that our strategy will work. That's a pretty strong assumption. Something else that's going wrong here. Where's the customer? The customer doesn't show up either. We have assumed the customer by saying that sales growth is going to be a certain percentage. But there's no line in here that says anything like the effect of a customer loyalty program. There's no line in here that says anything about the effect of a very public and humiliating product recall. Those things matter, but they're not in the spreadsheet. There's one other thing going on here. It's sort of subtle, but I think it's really important. How we calculate profit is total revenue minus total expenses. That equals profit. So, if I want to increase my revenue, what should I do with my expenses? I should cut them, right? How about if I take my advertising and put it down to 0? My profit will go up. It'll go up, according to the spreadsheet, it'll go up an amount that is exactly equal to the amount that I had been spending on advertising. Now, we know that that's not right. And we know that nobody would actually do that in real life because we understand that advertising is connected to the top line. But the spreadsheet doesn't know that. So we go through this, this kind of reasoning that says, well, what if I cut my profit? I know cutting it to 0 that's unreasonable. What if we cut it by 50%? How about by 20? How about by 10%? Surely I can cut my advertising by 10%, right? There must be 10% waste in there. The point is not that cutting the cost is a good thing or a bad thing. The point is that the way the spreadsheet works, the paradigm in it, the concept behind it, biases us in favor of cutting costs. You have to argue against it, even just to hold still. And that's the bias that I mean. Again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to cut costs. What I'm saying is that the tool forces us to do that more than we might think is reasonable. Let's try something else here. Here we've got two big supermarket chains, Safeway and SuperValu. A little over 2 years ago, during the height of the depths of the recession that we were in, the CEOs of these two organizations took very opposing views on the same day in the same newspaper in the same article. What one of them said, Steve Bird from Safeway, he said, "I wish that I had cut my prices faster." And Craig Herkert at SuperValu says, I'm sorry that I cut my prices as fast as I did. So here we have two guys who are presumably really smart and who are running two very large supermarket chains and who have enormous amounts of data, and each of them wishes that he was doing what the other one was doing. So that seems a little weird. I mean, don't they know something as basic as that? So how do we find out which one of them was right? Well, the typical way that we do that is to say, well, let's look at the results. Let's see what happened to them. So I've got some results here. So we'll figure out whose strategy worked. Well, the 10-year total return to shareholders for Safeway and SuperValu, that's what we're looking at over here. And it appears that SuperValu was doing better than Safeway. Now, it's still not exactly performance that we would be thrilled about, but it looks like they're doing better. So that settles it, doesn't it? Well, not exactly. How about if we look at just 1 year's worth of shareholder return? If we do that, now Safeway looks like it's doing better. Okay, well, I think that we really need to look at some more measures so that we can get a clearer view of what's going on. So let's get return on assets, return on sales, return on equity. That clarifies it, doesn't it? Now we see that Safeway is doing better, but SuperValu is improving faster. Well, I'm still not sure which of them was doing better. So let's add some more data. The Fortune rank, their sales, their profits. Now we've got it, don't we? Well, not exactly. I think we need more data. So how about if we look at a few more years? This is a lot of information, but we haven't answered our question, have we? It's really hard to tell which of these companies is doing better. We don't even know what is the measure of success that they care about. Did they care about any of these measures? Did they care about something else? But the thing is, the question that I asked, or the premise behind, let's answer the question, or let's figure out whose strategy worked by looking at their results, that was wrong. Because in effect, what we're doing is we're taking all these different results, a lot of numbers here, and saying that it's all due to their price change. And that's just unreasonable. A lot of things are going on at the same time. We could just as easily say that, that the results for SuperValu changed because they changed their CEO in 2009. So maybe it's due to management turmoil. Maybe it's due to something else. We can't describe it to their competition. We can't describe the whole thing to this one move of their price change. And yet, that's what we do all the time. We say, I made this change in my business, here's what the results were, it worked. I made this change, here's what the results were, it didn't work. And that's not the way to be thinking about it. Now, if we were to adopt exactly that way of thinking, here's the kind of thing we would say. Going back to General Motors, GM's market share today is something on the 18% range, give or take a couple of percentage points. But they're making really reliable cars now. If you go back 30 or 40 years, their market share was about 50%, but their cars were much less reliable. So, if we want GM to gain market share, they should make less reliable cars, because that's when they had the high market share. And that doesn't make sense, but that would be exactly the kind of thing of saying, let's gauge their price cut based on these results. It just doesn't work. So to summarize where we are so far, in short, why strategies fail is because they're developed by overconfident humans using tools that ignore competitors and customers and that discourage investment, and who explain complex effects with simple causes. And that's a problem. Now, in a way, I've overstated things just a little bit. On the other hand, I've also left out whole categories of things that fit into exactly these classes of issues. We haven't talked at all about groupthink, for instance, confirmation bias, anecdotal reasoning. We haven't talked about, on the tool side, we could talk about the problems with trend analysis or gap analysis, and don't even get me started on SWOT analysis. But there are the similar kinds of problems that lead us to choose strategies that fail, or to make us think that that bad strategies are good. Now, it's possible for us to do better. Now, we're stuck with being human, at least except for the few of us who become Navi. Avatar? Yeah, okay. And we're stuck needing tools because we can't do the arithmetic in our heads. It's just too complicated. But we're not stuck with being overconfident, and we're not stuck with needing bias tools. Those are things that we can change. I've used war games and strategy simulations a lot over the last 35 years. And so I've thought about, why do they work so well? And they're not the only things that work. There's other things that work also, such as scenario planning, brainstorming, shadow teams, I mean, that kind of stuff, which gives you different perspectives on the competition. But there is something about these techniques that works. And I'm just going to talk about these because these are the ones that I know best. So what makes them work? And I think that what it is that in a business war game, unlike a spreadsheet, there's somebody who's fighting back. You've got the people from your own company who are role-playing the competition, and when you come up with a strategy, when you come up with a move that you think is going to work, they're coming up with moves just like your real-life competitors who are trying to beat you. And that is a great way to get rid of overconfidence, because you've got some really stiff competition there. And that knocks down the overconfidence. It also gets rid of some of the other things like groupthink. On the tools side, think about, here's with the simulations that I've run. One of the cool things there, and this is something that you can try for yourself. Next time you put together an analysis of your market share forecast, analyze also your competitors at the same time. Make believe you are them and come up with what their forecast is going to be. Because remember, they want to win too. And so as they are trying to win, what is the market share that they are going to project for themselves? Then add up the forecasts. Guaranteed it will be over 100%. Now, there's not a lot of things that I'm sure of, but this is something I am sure of. Every market, all the time, has exactly 100% market share. You can count on that. So when you end up with this total of the forecasts that's way over 100%, that means at least one person is going to be disappointed. And that's where you're going to get into the really good thinking. is who is it going to be and why is that going to be? So I'm not saying that you're not going to be the one to gain market share. What I am saying is that when you can come up with that kind of competition in the simulation or in the business war game, that forces you to think things through much more. And it's that discipline that prevents you from falling into the overconfidence and prevents us from the simplistic kind of analysis. So that's what I have found really works. In effect, what they do is they help us think better. They help us think differently. And as we said at the beginning, that is the most important thing that we do. So now let's come back to the case that we started off with as we're starting to wrap up here. Refer back to the notes that you made and think about, would you answer the question differently now based on our conversation for the last 25 minutes? Would you say something different? I'll tell you what happened in this business war game. So there were about 30 people in the room, and 29 of them were sales managers, and those 29 people said, I don't know what we're doing here. This is a waste of time, because we know what the answer is. The answer is we've got to get our prices down. Fortunately, we have a productivity program that we'll be able to put in place, and our competitors will not be able to copy it because it's using proprietary technology. And if we do that, then we'll be able to get a price advantage over them. So we simulated that. This was a quantitative business war game. We simulated that, and if nobody did anything, if they just continued on business as usual, then they were going to lose about $500 million over the next few years. They said, yeah, that's what our business looks like. And I can say, okay, I understand why we're here now. But they said, well, but our productivity program and the price cut is going to take care of that whole thing. So we war games that and put their moves into the simulator, them making their productivity move, and their own people role-playing the competition, making their moves. And, well, they were partially right. Instead of losing $500 million over the next few years, they would lose $450 million over the next few years. And they were stunned. So wait a minute, what's going on? This is supposed to work beautifully. And the fact that they were so surprised told me that they had obviously analyzed it before. They had pushed the numbers, and they expected that it was going to make them profitable. But it didn't in the simulation. So why was that? Well, basically, they were assuming if we have this price cut due to our productivity improvement, our competitors won't be able to match our price. But their own people role-playing the competition said, we can't afford not to match your price. We don't want to match your price. I mean, we don't want to cut our prices because it's going to hurt us. But we have to keep our factories full too. So we have to do it. Now, I know in retrospect, when you hear this story told like this, I know it seems blindingly obvious. But trust me, it was not obvious, at least not to them at the time. And in all those war games that I've run, there has always been something about as obvious as this in retrospect that was not obvious at the beginning of the war game. Now, I had mentioned that there were 30 people in the room. 29 of them were the sales managers. The last person was the vice president of sales and strategy. And he was the one who made the war game happen. And he was thrilled. What he said was, okay, guys, now I've got your attention. Let's talk about what we can do differently. And these sales managers, who at the beginning of the process had said, this is a commodity, there's nothing at all that we can do, all of a sudden started to come up with ideas. And for the next hour and a half, they were writing down ideas for not how they could change the product, because they really couldn't, but they could change the services that they were offering to their distributors. They came up with idea after idea after idea, and and we simulated that. They did not cut their price, they just made the service improvements. Then we simulated that. That showed that they were going to be profitable, and they actually rolled that out in real life, and that's what happened. They ended up gaining market share. They didn't have to cut their price, but because of their better service, they gained market share. The competitors didn't catch on because the competitors, like them, were still caught in this, we have to keep our prices low kind of mentality. And so that's how it worked. They ended up becoming profitable in real life. The vice president was promoted to become head of the division. Everything was happy at this company, and everything was miserable with the competition. So that's what would happen here. Again, just notice that it doesn't matter how precise the numbers were. Who cares if it's losing $450 million, losing $430 million, $417 million? It doesn't matter. It's not about precision. So well, we've been talking about thinking here. And thinking, I think, is the key thing. And this is why I started off by mentioning that. Where if what we want is great success, where great success comes from is great decisions. Where great decisions come from is great decision making. And where great decision making comes from is great thinking. Great thinking is the bottom line. Now, those are my principles. And if you don't like them, well, I have others. And thank you very much. Thank you.